Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to Me talking to you for a while. Hi. Hello, Internet. It's me, Tristan. Sorry about last month. I actually, completely blanked on the stream. And then on the day that I was supposed to be doing it, I went for a road trip. And didn't get home until well after the stream was supposed to already be started. And also was completely wiped because I had been driving for about 4 hours. So, yeah, but hi, I'm here. I made it. I'm excited to be here talking to people. Part of me was trying to think that it might be interesting if I played Against the Storm while I did this, but I think that that might be a bit more setup than I'm ready to do, and I think that people come to chill and ask questions and stuff, so I think that I'm just gonna stick with that for the time being. So hi, my name is Tristan. I am the host of the YouTube channel Step Back, which you can find here at stepbackhistory.com, and I am also the host of It's Probably Not Aliens, and which you can find at probsnotaliens.com. If you want to support my work, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/stepbackhistory, or you can go to patreon.com/probsnotaliens, or you can sign up for Nebula using either the link through probsnotaliens or Step Back, and in doing so, you are supporting my work. If you want to support my work without paying money, which makes sense, word of mouth, find a video you like and share it with somebody who you think will like it. That's really the best things to do. Yeah, this is a show that I do once a month to kind of just keep the iron going. I am still trying to make videos. I'm having a very, very difficult time doing so, but I am still, scraping together the energy time and again to make stuff happen. So, and it's been almost a year since my last video came out, so I need to really get on it. My latest video is on private equity firms, and my next video, which I have a interview that I'm doing on August 25th, and once that interview is done, that's going to be the end of the research phase of that video that I've been working on now for, gosh, I've been working on it now for probably 4 months. 5 months. In some ways, I've been working on it since the end of November, since I released the last video. In some ways, though, the serious work, since I started doing interviews in the spring and everything like that, I was reading books over the winter. So, it's coming out. If I were to hazard a guess, I think that it could be out for people in late September, early October. That's the thing I'm shooting for. But also I kind of have this pipe dream of making a shorter video between then, because I have about a little under 3 weeks before the next interview, and so I'm thinking I might try to make another video that I have been dancing around for a very long time about Africa for the biggest part, but specifically about the French language, and how our world is shaped by the language of the media that we are in, and how we're completely missing out on because of that, we're missing out on a lot of very important things to understand about how the world is shaping up and how the next few decades are going to play out, because essentially the power players who are going to decide the later half of the 21st century and even the early 22nd century, all of that is going to be dependent on how the next few years play out, and specifically because we have a pretty good idea of how population growth is going to go over the next few decades. And what I will say is that the current consensus about the size of the human population is that it's going to cap out at about 9 billion people, and that the 9 billion people are going to like the a lot of countries are already in a state of population decline, and so where a lot of the population growth over the next few decades is going to be in sub-Saharan Africa. And so a lot of these countries, the language of business and the sort of language of international stuff is all French. And there's a whole process going on right now that a lot of people in like the sort of English speaking world aren't really aware of, which is that a lot of these countries are moving away from Western dominance and are moving closer to Russia and China as allies. And that, you know, and especially with stuff like the closing of USAID and everything like that, that like sort of the BRICS block, if you want to call it that, is making massive power grabs, setting itself up for like the future of the world for the next few decades, and it's all happening in these places. But also, there's a whole like long history of French colonialism and the sort of overthrowing of French foreign power and influence, and it's a whole thing. And it's like one of the most important stories going on right now that we don't hear much about, because again, it's all happening in French, and like how we don't know much about what China is doing because all of their media is Chinese. So like that's sort of the video that I know that it's time for me to make a video about something, because it's one of those things that I don't stop talking about with everybody that I know. And this one about French and French Africa has been like one that I have been annoying everybody in my life with for years. So I'm definitely ready to talk about my video, which I'm calling France-Afrique 2.0. And there's so many cool aspects to get into, like how it's changing even like the ways that we approach language. And yeah, it's gonna be pretty good. I'm pretty excited for that. We're also right now really deep in the recording of, we're about halfway or a little bit over halfway through recording the next season of It's Probably Not Aliens. So we've recorded 3 episodes. I think we've recorded 3 or 4 episodes. We have 3 more left to do. And once those are in the hands of they're all going to go over to Max, one of our editors. Once they're done editing the video, or the podcasts, we will look to making a release. And then, you know, Scott and I gotta get researching on the next season, so that's another project that I need to do. And all of this is when I'm not being doing a full-time shift at my job and then doing another full-time shift as a parent, and that like little tiny thing that can claw away is basically all the time I get for content creation. So that's why shit's been slow. Because basically, like, all of the time that people would use for, like, watching shows, playing games, or relaxing, or any of those things, that is the only time I have to make content. So that's just life at the moment. And I was actually having a chat with Mexi, the YouTuber Mexi, over on, we were having, like, a Discord chat. And she was mentioning, like, that she, like for the next, like, 2 years, she's like, I don't think I have any realistic plans to reliably make content until then, because there's just like, you know, this phase of a child's life is just insanely busy. So you don't really have that kind of time. But, you know, my son's going to be starting kindergarten next year, and, you know, I'm hoping, you know, inshallah, we'll see, that it's the podcast, It's Probably Not Aliens, is doing really well. And if I can, like, I think that if I can make like a really good push with it, and we can get it to a really good place, that I could through it, and hopefully through getting some, like, you know, getting some more effort into Step Back, justify taking a part-time position instead of a full-time position. But all of that is going to be dependent on a bunch of stuff, because time-wise right now, I don't know if you guys know, you guys probably know, you guys are a pretty smart audience, but Mark Carney has just pushed some huge spending changes to the Canadian federal government. Like the new Liberal government has approved a $30 billion increase of the Canadian military, which I know is like, when you look at like American federal budget numbers, that's like nothing, but this is humongous for us. And in doing so, he says he's going to have to find $25 billion in the budget, and primarily they're going to be going after CRA, which is sort of the Canadian version of the IRS, and IRCC, which is the Immigration Department, which is the people who fund my job. So that's going to be a whole thing, which means, like, you know, my job I could be out of work this time next year. We'll see. But yeah, that's life. But yeah, I first want to start off. So those are like the sort of content related things. But to kind of get going, I really like to start my podcast, not podcast, but like start this show off by talking about, you know, talking to you guys, and also specifically collecting wins, which is that whenever I do a stream, I try to start with people talking about, like, since the last stream, what kind of cool stuff have they done, what kind of victories they've had, small or big, because while there's a lot of darkness in this world, and there's like a lot of, you know, there's a lot of big problems that we are dealing with, the world isn't all doom and gloom, despite what people think. And there is good in this world, and there is room for hope in this world, and I like for us to start by giving that the space that it deserves, because it very often does not. And I have a couple that I can actually talk about that I would like to bring up with you guys. When it comes to, like, my personal life, you know, things are kind of just keep going as they're going. But when it comes to, like, the world, I do have a couple of things that I've been, like, you know, one of the things that I try to do, and I know people are, like, kind of reactive against this, but I like looking into how we are dealing with existential threats in, like, how we are, like, thinking of new ways to do things. Like, one of the things, I had a really big conversation about this last Wednesday, and it is how we are very doom and gloom about climate change in the West, and not for, like, incorrect reasons. But what I will also say is that this is another artifact of this is also has to do with the fact that we live in the Anglosphere of, like, we live in sort of the America-centric, English-speaking part of the West. And if you think about climate change and dealing with our energy crises in the, you know, the rest of the world, there's actually a lot of optimistic things to go with. Like one of the things that I think is, like, a really, really critical aspect is that the BRICS. So BRICS is like the sort of this sort of economic alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but it has several other members, and several other members that have been invited or are considering joining. And basically the whole idea is to just make a realignment of world power, a structure of world power outside of the United States' dominance. And they just had their latest meeting, like, about a month ago. And one of the things that they have made, like, as their big public statement is that for geopolitical reasons, they are trying to intensely fast track their transition away from hydrocarbons as their sources of energy. Reason being is that if you look at, like, there are geopolitical reasons why the West has resisted so much us moving off oil. And the main reason is that the United States basically uses oil and our dependence on oil and oil diplomacy to make a mess of geopolitics. Basically to the entire, like, American-led world order has at its core hydrocarbons, and specifically petroleum, as the, like, major thing it uses to control everybody. And so the BRICS meeting, they said about how uh, transition away from fossil fuels is not only like an existential requirement to, deal with the impacts of climate change, because the BRICS countries are from the countries that are going to be disproportionately more affected by climate change than like Western countries, but also as a way to reduce their dependence on American hydrocarbons. And so this has resulted in things like China has put together some really, really fascinating new things. Like the big ones that I was looking at were that the Chinese government are, in Inner Mongolia have opened up the first sort of experimental thorium thorium tetrafluoride liquid fuel nuclear power plant. Now, this was always a theoretical form of nuclear power that could be revolutionary to the way that we see nuclear power. A few reasons is that the fuel it uses is a molten salt made of thorium tetrafluoride, which, if you're not a dork, you wouldn't have an idea of what that means, but it's basically a salt, a liquid salt. And thorium, instead of uranium, is the material that is being used as the fissile, like the source of the nuclear chain reaction. It's much less energy dense than uranium, but the important thing is that it can be, you can do nuclear fission with it in a liquid state. In a traditional nuclear power plant, you have to have these uranium rods that, in order to control the nuclear reaction, you use these control sticks that go in and out to slow down or speed up the reaction. And if that stuff melts down, like, the entire building of a nuclear power plant has to be designed to contain this stuff, because it's put in a tank of coolant or water, basically. But if it gets too hot and there's like a meltdown, that water will immediately turn to steam, and the building could explode, and radioactive steam could like blow out of the building and cause like massive like that's what happened at Chernobyl. And the way that a thorium power plant works is that if it gets too hot, or say like the power's cut off or something is an issue, what they have is there's going to be a drainage tunnel with like a little like cap that is kept cold by like constantly blowing cold air on it or something like that. And then if the power goes out, that little cold air blowing thing turns off, the cap melts, and the entire fuel goes into an underground tank where it will be stored safely. The major issue that people were having with thorium power plants is that, one, it doesn't have the same geopolitical usage, because it doesn't use enriched uranium, which means that you can't, like, a lot of like nuclear power plants are like the process of enriching uranium is also the process of developing the technology for developing nuclear weapons. So the doing that is kind of like a stepping stone in that process, and so we developed it much more. While like thorium power plants can't be turned into weapons, essentially. The other thing that makes it a really useful thing is that uranium, the uranium that you need to make a typical nuclear power plant today, is fairly rare. Like when it comes to its like density in the earth, like how much of it is in the earth, it's comparable to silver. So we're like burning silver to run these plants, while thorium is in any sort of rare earth mining operation, there's going to be tons of thorium. Thorium is a very common material that's found in the same mines that we use for getting rare earth minerals, which are used in all of our technology. But at the same time, like, you can find it in seawater if you really wanted to. So like there's tons of thorium. So it's a lot cheaper and easier to get. The problem they had too is that that these liquid power plants, they couldn't figure out how to refuel them. So like once they would start, they kind of just once they ran out of like nuclear material, they would kind of just stop. But apparently, the Chinese plant, or the Chinese like firm that's working on it, was able to consistently refuel it so they can keep it running constantly and generating power. So if this one works in Mongolia or Inner Mongolia, like the sort of part of Mongolia that's in China, then they'll probably build more pretty quickly, because that is going to be a lot of energy. The other one that they're also pushing forward on, and also Canada's also pushing on it, we have like one in Ontario being built, is what are called small modular nuclear reactors, which are still uranium plants, but they are much smaller, and they are designed with like the idea that you don't have to you don't have to construct them the same way that you construct a typical nuclear power plant, so they can be a lot smaller, but also that you can expand them because you don't have to build the entire building around one thing. The other aspect too, the other one that's this is sort of like a this is the one that's probably gonna get me more like, you know, this is gonna get me more shit from people, but like that nuclear fusion has had some real like leaps and bounds since 2021. In 2021, I think was the first time they were able to demonstrate ignition, which is where they were getting more energy out of the system than they were putting into it. And since that discovery, there has been a lot more really big pushing forward on fusion. There's a lot more money going into it, because we're not that far away from like it's not impossible that like if we were to build a brand new fusion plant from scratch right now, we could almost use it as a nuclear power plant. So that is pretty impressive. I think they just did groundbreaking in I want to say like Oregon or something like that or Washington, and it is the first like tokamak fusion plant that's designed to connect to the power grid, which is like a pretty big deal. The major issue that they were having with these fusion plants were that this is basically basically the issue with fusion, right? Is that in order to have the fusion reaction, you have to like have the hydrogen in it be contained under extremely high pressure using magnets. The magnets have to be at so like to make it work, you have to have extremely powerful magnets, and while you are fusing material, you are creating some of the hottest temperatures in the universe, like hotter than the surface of the sun, like extremely hot temperatures. Yet, the magnets that you need to make this reaction possible, in order for them to have the magnetic power that they need in order to do the creating the magnetic field to create that heat, has to be extremely cold. It has to be like almost absolute zero. So the issue is, how do you maintain a system where you have to have some of the hottest temperatures and coldest temperatures that in the universe existing very, very close to each other, and keep that reaction going for like, you know, more than like just like a couple seconds, and managing that magnetic field is, in the past, would require it, like the way to function it required a lot of like micro adjustments and stuff like that were basically like way too fast and way too difficult for people to do properly. But there's been a breakthrough in recent years where some kind of like machine learning technology has been able to be implemented to manage managing the magnetic fields, and has been pretty successful at it. And they've had some pretty promising types of like tests of fusion stuff lately. So it seems like they are like, I know it's like one of those things that's been 10 years away for like 50 years, but it seems like there's a real corner being turned on that technology. There's some other stuff too. Like I could go on. Like I keep looking up this stuff. Like COF 999, a new compound that was discovered in California earlier this year. COF 999 is a. It's like a. It's a fairly easy to produce material. Like it's made with like pretty basic tech, like pretty basic materials. I think right now they're just trying to figure out how to make it at scale. But COF 999 is a material that is it's really good at absorbing carbon dioxide. So it's a carbon capture technology. Now, one of the things about carbon capture materials in the past that made them not really that useful was that they would, once they were like saturated with CO2, in order to get the CO2 out of them again so that they could be used again, they would need to be heated to like a super high temperature, and that these materials would really only run a few times before they're basically depleted. And they didn't run very well in places where humidity was very high. But COF 999 has a phenomenal ability to absorb carbon dioxide, just suck it out of the air really, really efficiently. But on top of that, it's also the temperature it needs to be heated to in order to get to release its CO2. That is that so that it can be like sequestered or something like that, is about 60 degrees. Or let me just translate that. About 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So 60 degrees. So 60 degrees is way easier to, like, of a temperature to get something to. Like, 60 degrees is not even the warmth of, like, a cup of coffee. Like, I think a cup of coffee is typically around 80 or 90 degrees, if not, like, 70 or something like that. So it's a pretty manageable level of heat to get the carbon dioxide out of it. And also it seems that it actually works better in more humid situations, and that it seems to be able to be used over and over and over again without much degradation. So if they can make it at scale, they could use it to sequester a lot of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which I think is, because my whole thing is like, I don't think that there's going to be any individual solution to climate change. Like, I don't think we're going to figure out one thing that's going to solve it. It's going to be a million small solutions, because we went from being a sort of like mutilated economy where we all depended on one type of power source and one like way of doing things. And this problem is so big that we're going to be addressing it in a million different ways to make things work. And COF 999 carbon capture, I know, is a thing that a lot of people sneer at, but it actually does, like, it does seem like there is some interesting things being turned on there. There's also a new solar cell technology that's becoming a lot more efficient. So there's like a huge, like they're called perovskite solar cells. Perovskite solar cells are another like solar, like, I don't know too much about it, but it's like basically another like solar panel technology that is apparently going to be much more efficient and much more like much easier to like get a like working on like to get it's just much more efficient at converting sunlight to electricity, and apparently it can be put on a lot more surfaces. Like, there was, when I was reading it, there was like talk about how it could be used, like you could put them on like windows because it could be like transparent and stuff. So that's pretty cool. And that there's like there's stuff with like fuel cells, like sodium air fuel cells that use. So fuel cells are a sort of technology that use air and uses like hydrogen and air to basically do a form of like it turns that into water vapor, and in doing so produces energy. And one of the things about it, like it's not really like a way to like produce electricity, because the amount of energy that you need to separate water and water into its constituent components in order to get the hydrogen that you need for fuel cells is pretty energy intensive. Although there's some like real big breakthroughs happening on that, it's more of a storage technology, because part of what you need for it is just air, and its output is water. And this has been floated not so much like for like everyday things, because hydrogen like explodes, so it's like, you know, you're not going to be putting it in everyone's cars, but fuel cells have been floated as a potential solution for how to deal with flying airplanes and stuff like that, because they can get the sort of energy density that you need in order to maintain flight without having to worry about because batteries are very, very they're very heavy, right? So that's a big one. So like there's a bunch of like, that's my like win, is that I'm following up on this stuff specifically to keep myself away from doomering. And so, you know, I think that my climate change prognosis is that things are going to be really bad and the West is not going to be helpful at all. But I do think that we will come out the other end of it in some fashion. What state the world is at that point, I don't know. But I do think that, like, we're not going to climate change ourselves into extinction. I hope, anyway. But that's my win. All right, let me see if I can. I'll look in the chat real fast, see if I can get some wins from people. Let's see. You got the okay. So Nadia got the process started and filed papers with the German government for residency. The existential threat that I've avoided repatriation, where my letter of LGBT won't take the USA long for mass imprisonment. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, getting out of the US is pretty much is a pretty good win. Won't lie. Let's see. EROEI for all forms of nuclear, including thorium, is pretty broadly overestimated. Energy return on energy invested. Yeah, well, it seems like it's, yeah, I mean, people seem pretty into it. It's not, I mean, nothing is going to hit petrol, but it's a pretty good one. That's a hot tub, yeah. Fission developments are very cool and should have definitely gotten more investment in previous years, but at this point, solar is so ridiculously cheap. It's hard to argue that it's not going to own the space. Potentially, I think that there's use for all of it. Like solar stuff is really, really good, and it's really cheap, and it. I do think that it's going to have a lot of really good usage, but I also think that, as we're kind of already seeing, that like the Earth's energy consumption is already like it's going up and up and up as we like, you know, develop a bunch of new technologies. And so I do think that, like, you know, solar to meet our needs is space and time and stuff is, I think that other things are also going to be useful. Not to say that solar and wind are not going to be part of the equation. It's just like, I think a lot of things are going to be, because we have to, you know, the sort of history of civilization, if you like think of like the Kardashev scale, is basically like, as civilizations advance, they need more and more energy. Even if it's not like, you know, petrol, like carbon energy, they're just going to need more and more energy. And that means that we need to constantly be on the lookout for new ways to harvest energy from everything. So I do think, and I think that like nuclear stuff, like it is some potent stuff. And the other thing too is that wind and solar, because they're interstitial, means that they have to they're a little bit choked by developments in battery technology, and battery technology is a whole other. There is some cool stuff on the horizon, but at the moment, like, that's the biggest like choke point is the word I'm looking for for solar and wind, because they need, like, you need find new and novel forms of energy storage in order to get it to work. But you know, fuel cells are a thing. There's like, you know, gravity batteries. There's all sorts of like types of batteries that you can make to store power. Just, you know, that's another thing. Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other wins, but if you have any other wins, please drop them in. I'm going to go through the questions now. So first question I got is from Nordic Mountain, which asks, which was before the stream started, said, do you think there's a chance, however small, that 3i/Atlas is an alien probe? Probably not. Mostly because that would need to have some positive evidence in its direction, and at the moment there's really nothing like this isn't a I don't talk about this specifically, but I talk about in a podcast that hasn't come out yet, that the process of determining if something is of extraterrestrial origin is going to require pretty high standards of evidence, because you're going to have to eliminate pretty much every other form of identification. So for those who don't know, 3i/Atlas is it's like another Oumuamua that we've like noticed that's coming through. So it's an extra solar, so it's like a comet coming in through outside of our solar system, and the same guy as always, fucking Avi Loeb, who you should really see Angela Collier's video on Avi Loeb. It's really good. But he has tried to say that it's aliens, and it's like, well, the chances are pretty low. And like the problem why like Avi Loeb can say it's aliens and scientists are like, well, probably not, is mostly due to the fact that we don't actually know all that much about it at all. But there's really nothing seriously making us consider that it's aliens. But it is interesting because it's like the third ever interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. So, you know, it's got some interesting stuff. Like, it's got a lot of water in it. But the thing that Loeb is saying is that because it's going to pass close to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, that its trajectory is sus. And that it's moving faster, but I don't know. It's not a very good. It's not a very good explanation. That, like, it needs more. That's a very very sparse part of evidence. So I guess, like, do you think there's a chance, however small, that it's an alien probe? Sure, there's a chance, but like, there are a lot more other ones that are much more likely. The other one, why aren't enough people talking about the voting irregularities in New York State where thousands of votes went to the Democratic senator, but 0 for Harris and a lot for Trump? This is a result of an ongoing lawsuit. So one of the reasons why not enough people are talking about it is because of two things. One, this has not been, like, there's two things. One, there is a current lawsuit in the process that suggests that there might have been some irregularities or some, like, issues in the counting or something like that. But couple things. One, it wouldn't have been enough to turn the election. Two, it actually, the results that we got line up pretty closely with the districts that are being talked about. So this is the reason that they're talking. The reason that people are, like, suspicious is because there's this one. There's these, like, counties in New York that went to Trump, but voted for the Democratic senator. and voted for a bunch of other Democratic stuff. And that is weird because it's like, why are there no votes for Harris? But there is like a bunch of votes for Trump, but like all these like other things. But like, if you like subject matter experts, like people who are experts on New York demographics and like New York election data, have pointed out that this is, while it's like, you know, probably worth investigating, it's not, it wouldn't have been enough to turn the election. It wasn't even in, it's in a state that already went to Harris anyway. But on top of that, the voting patterns there are strange, but they're not dissimilar to how they went in 2020, because this same area voted for like a lot of Democratic stuff, but also voted for Trump in the 2020 election. And the reason that is cited is because these are Orthodox. These are very heavy Orthodox Jewish like districts, and I guess that like very conservative, but very like Democratic leaning in a bunch of stuff. So there's like a lot of like, you know, the experts don't seem to be alarmed by the results, I guess is the answer. This is the thing. It'd be really hard to do election fraud in America because we have so much, like, I feel like American elections are some of the most studied elections on Earth. And so major discrepancies would actually be pretty difficult to pin down, or would be pretty easy to spot, because like people know, like down to the district, like what people expect and like what would come out. And so the Blue Anon people unfortunately don't have a whole lot to stand on, because the 2024 election, while like, you know, not the answer that they wanted, lines pretty closely with like, you know, what people expected based on like demographics and stuff like that. So there you go. Does the Blue Anon movement have any legitimacy behind it? No. It is a very good example of something that I say about conspiracy theories, which is that a lot of times people's conspiracy theories are when their politics, or sorry, when reality becomes inconvenient for their politics. So if their idea of how the world works is threatened by, like, or is contradicted by reality, that's when the conspiracies start to develop, because they need to basically, instead of changing their mindset to understand the situation they're in, they try to change the world that they're in order to fit their idea of the universe. Like, you know, the flat earthers are that way because they want to keep a like very literalist interpretation of like Christianity and the Bible and stuff, or like, you know, like a lot of racists, like white supremacists and stuff like that, their conspiracies are about how the world could be functioning the way that it is, when they have a very hierarchical view of how people of different ethnic backgrounds, you know, how they are essentially, in like an essential way. And Blue Anon is a group of liberals, because if there's anything that the last, like, you know, basically since the November election have shown, is the utter like intellectual and moral bankruptcy of neoliberal centrist sort of, you know, mainstream centrist democratic politics. It's now at the head of like the by far most unpopular party in the country, even more than the Republicans, and has shown, in the face of one of the largest crises to, I think, like, if not the largest crisis to the United States in its history, probably at least since the Civil War, has been completely unable to rise to the situation and do what is necessary. And I do think that, like, until I suspect that 2026 we're going to see a lot of very interesting Democratic primaries, and that the victories that the Democrats are going to get are going to say a very different lesson than what the Democrats of today think is successful electoralism, and we're going to you see some major changes. Like, I think the fact that 10,000 people registered as candidates for the 2026 election after Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary in New York says a lot. I think there's going to be a lot. I think there's going to be some. The Democratic Party leadership has shown itself to be completely unable to rise to the occasion that they are in, and people are aware of that. And I think there's going to be some major changes, major backlash to everything that's happening, both in the Democratic Party, but also with the Trump administration and everything. So, yeah, I don't. Blue Anon, I think, is a reactionary backlash to the idea that centrist neoliberalism has essentially shown itself to be a completely bankrupt ideology with no ideas, with nothing to really stand on. And so they have to default to conspiracy theories to say that, no, it's not that our ideas are bad or that we lost the election, but that there was, it was undermined and that Trump cheated or something. I'd thought about you the other day when I wanted to ask you about, have you been able to feel safe visiting your wife's family since the Border Patrol went crazy? No. Nope. I think we've come pretty much to the conclusion, my wife and I have come very, very solidly to the conclusion that as things are, unless something major changes, we are not going to the United States under any circumstances. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, probably not even for like funerals or weddings, because there's a non-zero chance. Like, first of all, as a Canadian citizen, there's a decent chance that bad things could happen to us, including my kid who does not have American citizenship. But also, because of my advocacy, my social media presence, my background, that if I went to the U.S., I the chances of me going to CCOT are not high, but they're higher than they're not zero either. And not only that, but even something less crazy, like less intense, would be that now that they are checking people's social media and turning people around for basically not sufficiently agreeing with the regime, if they found my social media feeds and they turned me away from entering the United States, at the border, that would be bad. Not only because even if say a new administration came into power and they weren't doing all this stuff anymore, people who get turned away at the border for any reason will get haunted by that basically for the rest of their life. I think it's John Green who talks pretty regularly about how once when he was 18 or something like that, tried to cross the Canadian border and got turned back. And now he has to deal with that every single time he goes into Canada. So I'm okay, I might as well just not go to the US while it's dangerous like that. Not to mention elbows up, we don't want to give any money to American companies anyway either, right? We're participating in a nationwide boycott of American goods, so that means that if we can afford to, don't go. I'm not going to the U.S. and giving American companies money because they have threatened to conquer us and make us the 51st state. So fuck off. It could be really silly to go visit a country under any circumstances that their official position right now is that they wish to annex my country and turn it into a state within their fucking country. Anyways, so I'm not going to America, not for any reason at the moment. Which is sad because I have a lot of friends in the U.S. and I really like going to VidCon and stuff like that, but I'm just not going. I'm not going. Um, might be going to Mexico more now that Canada and Mexico are kind of working out deals to become friends and allies without the United States, which is working out which I think is pretty cool. Is it safe to say that blank is acceptable when all options for a peaceful settlement have been foreclosed? I mean, yeah, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say that on a social media platform. What are you talking about? The two CFA francs getting ditched, especially the one with the northerly one on Sahel. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, it's probably not aliens. Did you guys figure out how to move Big Rock? Nope. Big Rock still remains unmoved. You could easily get that $30 billion from, I don't know, taxing the rich. Part of it, Canada doesn't have, I don't think Canada has quite enough billionaires to get $30 billion. Like, I know, Dazia, I feel ya, but also, the Canadian economy is so much smaller than the American economy that, like, we don't have, like, how many billionaires does Canada have? It's not as many as America. Yeah, according to Forbes, there's an estimated 62 billionaires in Canada. And, like, yeah, like, raising taxes on them would be pretty great, especially because inequality is going up quite drastically in this country. But, like, there's no, like, adding 30 billion to our like spending is absurd. It's a huge increase in our spending, and without a clear way to pay for it, it's going to be it's extremely reckless. Like, $30 billion, I think, is like almost equivalent to like 30-ish, like almost like a third of our entire federal budget. Like, it's quite huge. Hey, Meet and Matt's got a win. You finally got off your butt and cleaned up your bedroom, including sorting through a few years of papers to file or shred. Very nice. I love handling that kind of shit. Stuck with not having much time since working at Walmart. There's somehow part-time means 6 days a week. I struggle to find time to do stuff. Yeah. That's tough. Not gonna lie. Nadia, we already talked about Nadia. Fraudulent Brit is hoping to relocate to the Seattle area within the next year or so. Best of luck. Have we ever talked about the Dark Forest on your podcast? I was listening to a podcast about that today, and I realized it's just projecting our own bullshit into hypothetical aliens. This is the theory behind. This is like the Fermi paradox answer that is. It's part of the three body problem, right? Like, the three body problem kind of talks about this. Basically, if I remember correctly, it's just that any alien that sort of any like intelligent species that sticks its head up and is too obvious in its existence will get itself killed. Let me just work this out. Because of, like, hostile aliens. Because, and the ones that do survive, by not getting killed by more advanced civilizations, actually are the ones that are best at hiding their masking their existence. And, like, there's some stuff, like, there's a lot of, like, assumptions in that, like, but some of those assumptions come from a place of like, really the problem that we have is that we only have our own context to really understand extraterrestrial life, right? Like we only have one planet that evolved life that we know of, that we have seen, and so we only really have ourselves as an example. And on Earth, there's a pretty good correlation between intelligence and being predators. Like pretty much every there's not a I'm struggling to think right now, but there are not very many, if any, like really smart herbivores. Just because the process of like having a plant-based diet in the wild it requires a lot of energy to just digest all of that plant matter, but also it's not a terribly difficult life. Like it's not like it's your food doesn't run away from you. So intelligence is just not something that's usually selected for, but for predators it is, because predators need to outsmart their prey and catch them. So a lot of like intelligence is tied to being to a carnivorous diet, which means that like the idea of like violence being a major aspect of the culture of any species that gets sufficiently evolved to the point where it has the intelligence to leave its planet is not I mean, with our one example that we can point to, it's not an unbased solution. Like it is not a answer that doesn't have a base. Like if you look at like the most intelligent species on Earth, humans, chimpanzees, or even like the sort of different branches of species that have developed intelligence, like cetaceans, dolphins, octopuses, and like humans, and other like sort of great apes and such. All of them are predators in one way or another. So that is part of and the smartest ones of them are also the most like the most violent ones. Like the most intelligent cetaceans, or like dolphins, for example, are predators, and like orcas, which are sort of this like related to dolphins, are also predators. And the like yeah, and like we can see things like when predatory animals evolve away from eating meat and move towards eating plant matter, they actually do, like, one of the first things that goes is their intelligence. Good examples of that are like the panda, the koala, those are the two big ones that, like, relatively recent in evolutionary terms became herbivores instead of being more omnivorous. Yeah. So, but there is some other aspects that would not stick out, which is one, a sufficiently advanced alien civilization probably doesn't have a need for, at least we probably wouldn't think so, like a need for like violence would be a thing that they would have to kind of, again, this is also a sort of assumption that could have no base, which is like, in order to evolve sufficiently to go into space, they would have to go past their violent tendencies. Not necessarily true. Case in point, us. But like, they would, like, the amount of material in the universe is so plentiful that like a sufficiently intelligent species really isn't going to like have a lot of motivation to take over us for like our stuff. Like aliens and humans, like, our aliens will have, like, unless they're like a super like hyper advanced civilization like a Kardashev 2 or 3 civilization, is like not going to have a much need for anything that our solar system can provide, because they'll have all they need without having to leave their solar system and travel the absolute oceans of space that it would require to get to us. But one of the things that they would need from us, and I do think is, we're kind of seeing it a little bit in like the sort of AI race, and I think that there's something interesting in there, although it's not like fully fleshed out. But I do think that one of the kind of Fermi paradox answers that I think is really interesting, and might be one of the ones that really answers, which is that if materials and matter and like energy is pretty plentiful in space, then what is like a truly rare resource that that advanced civilizations might want from us? And what it will be is information. Because there is one thing that we have that aliens don't, which is all of the information that is unique to our circumstance. And so what aliens might do is they might not want to intervene with us, because by doing so, by like making that connection, they could be contaminating a source of information, where they want like clean, unadulterated data that they can then use to, for whatever various purposes. But information might be like one, like especially like the sort of high complex information that like active biospheres create, might be one of like the rarest things in the universe. And so they might be keeping us from seeing other aliens as a response. I think that to me, that's a more compelling answer than like the way that the dark forest theory works. But maybe I should talk about it. It's extremely doubtful that interstellar travel is possible even for aliens. Maybe. I do think that there are ways of doing interstellar travel that are possible. Probably not with like actual living things, but probes and stuff like that could definitely happen. They'll just take a really long time. Von Neumann probes and stuff like that, I think, would be a thing. Fission development. Okay. Oh, let's see. Where did I leave off? Back with another dino fact. Google Eutyrannus, the biggest known feathered dinosaur. Its fossils have traces of emu-like fluff that was 8-ish inches long. Oh my god, big fluffy boy? That's beautiful. That's pretty fun. I've mostly been counting on regression back to the Stone Age from lack of energy, peak oil, etc., and replaying the Permian Triassic, but my being too short-lived to see much of it play out. I respectfully disagree. I understand the motivation behind it, but I do think that we have a skewed understanding of it, because we're part of the world that is that stands to lose the most of its global power through the end of fossil fuel dominance. And so like we were always going to be brought into the new age kicking and screaming, but luckily for the world, the West is losing its grip on the power over the planet, and I think that the next stage might be a little bit more, stable. We also have to be very wrong about physics and astronomy for living beings to do interstellar travel. Yeah. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's definitely a stretch. Are more interstellar objects hitting the solar system in recent years, or are we just getting better at detecting them? I think it's the latter. TBH, it's also the fact that a lot of people don't vote down ballot, just president. I do know a lot of Republicans here won't vote for senator because, oh well, Chuck will win. Granted, some said for president. Okay, makes sense. Hyper-Orthodox Jews in New York voted for Trump because Israel and hated/wouldn't consider voting for Kamala in specific because of her mild social justice focus and B, powerful, confident, dark-skinned woman. Okay. The Rockland City lawsuit is almost assuredly not going to uncover a widespread conspiracy, but hopefully will turn some attention to voting machine security, which is a legit concern. Yeah? I don't know why America uses those voting machines. Like, here we use paper ballots, and it's fine. Or, actually, that's not 100% true. For federal elections, we use paper ballots. For Ontario elections, we don't use voting machines. Yeah, I guess like it's true on both. Like we do still have paper ballots even in Ontario. In Ontario, I think we have machines that automatically count our ballots. Cause like you'll get a piece of paper and you still have to like mark in the candidate, but you know, you then put it in like this envelope and the envelope goes to the machine and the machine kind of sucks it in. I don't know if they tally it through that or if it's just a security measure, but we use paper ballots. Then again, also, on average, Americans vote for a lot more stuff. Like, one of the things that I think is really, really different about Canadian elections versus American elections is that American elections are all tied to the same day, and you have a lot more stuff that is, like, a lot more positions that are elected positions than we do. Like, we don't elect coroners, we don't elect dog catchers or mosquito control officers here. We don't elect judges. But what we do, so when we go to vote, typically we're only voting for like, I've never voted in an election that is for more than two things. And that is municipal only. Like, there may be in 2026, I go to the polls again, and there may be three things where you vote for mayor, you vote for your city councilor, and you vote for like school board people. But like, and like for federal elections, almost every election I've voted in that isn't like, what's it called? Like the only elections where I have voted for more than one thing was the last city elections. They were all city level. One was here in London where I had to vote for a city ward, like a city councillor, and a education person, like a board of education people, not board of education. What do you call it? I don't know. School board trustees and that kind of thing. But then also the Toronto, the municipal Toronto election, where I got to see fucking Faith Goldie on a ballot, which was distressing, to say the least. And so I did not vote for her, obviously. But every other one, it's just like MP or MPP, basically, right? But in America, your ballot is humongous. You have so many things to vote for. And I think that is a problem. I think one of America's election issue comes from the fact that you vote for too many things that don't need to be voted positions, like judges, or like, what do you call it? Like, you vote for judges. You vote for like stuff like coroner. I don't know. It's really strange. These are not jobs that need to be. And I think that America having a political judiciary is one of the reasons it's in such a mess right now. Like, for example, Not that Americans vote on this, but like because it's so like checked out of politics. Like I couldn't even name a Canadian Supreme Court justice right now. I just couldn't. They don't factor in like as individual people as often. But yeah, all that is to say, I don't understand why people use voting machines. They should. They don't. They don't seem to be secure. Why just use paper ballots? It, despite all the technology, it's still like the absolute safest way to vote. Win for me. I finally started cleaning my painting desk after 2 years. Also fun. Dino Fact. Yeah, Utosaurus. We talked about that. Yeah. Parrots. Parrots were intentionally selected for A, knowledge of variety of fruits that can only produce with short season and know how to move around and take advantage, plus large customary social groups. Same with crows and arguably humans. Yeah. Well, Elliot, on that point, crows also do eat. Like, predators are selected for intelligence, but also omnivores specifically do a lot. Like, some of the smartest animals that are not like the hyper smart ones are like crows, raccoons, and stuff like that. But parrots are a decent counterexample. I guess maybe the aliens will all be frugivores, Elephants. Ooh, elephants are actually a good example. You know what? Fuck, that's a good one. Elephants, I think, are really intelligent because they are migratory over a huge area and have to remember a whole lot of information about moving around. But yeah. That's really fascinating. Yeah. Elephants is a really good one though. So there are exceptions already. Materials aren't plentiful in space. The vast majority of space is flat out vacuum. The rest tends to pool into gravity wells like gas giants, brown dwarfs, stars, black holes. What I mean by that is like the trouble of going to an entire other solar system for materials, like for things like our solar system isn't remarkable. It doesn't have any like special stuff in it that you wouldn't find in most other solar systems. So like if you were an advanced enough alien civilization that you could cross like to another solar system, there's not really much that like we would have that their solar system would not. And with enough energy, you can kind of make any material you want now. As like as some people are talking about how there's like there's a new startup that is like talking about using fusion not to make power but to make material. They're talking about how they're literally trying to be able to use nuclear fusion to make gold. And I was like, oh, interesting. That sounds like a huge energy investment, but okay. The physics is right, I guess. All right. Do you think it'd be possible for a society to industrialize without inventing capitalism? Like, suppose you had state-owned manufacturers from the start. Not impossible. Case in point, like we saw like some extremely planned, intricate, top-down economies in like the fucking Bronze Age. Like ancient Egypt was a like very much like kind of close to being a planned economy. honestly, I don't think. I think that capitalism really can't like is really a very specific product of colonization and slavery. I do think, and so I do think that while there will always be different economic even if a different type of way that humanity ran, there would still be major transitions of power as we moved from an economy that was dependent on agriculture to one that was dependent on industry, like manufacturing. But would that necessarily have been capitalism? Not entirely. Not necessarily. Agriculture uses a lot of Haber process affairs at minimum. Plus, even where electricity is spotty, that's still largely coal. Oh, oh shit! I need to find this. I was reading an article about this recently because there was Nadia. You are a very smart cookie. Because I remember that there's actually I think it's an Australian chemistry university thing that was that just developed some process for making ammonia that was way less energy intensive than the Haber process, which when I read it, to the point where I think it might use no electricity. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it real fast. So for those who don't know, the Haber process is a chemistry process that's used to turn nitrogen in the air into ammonia, which is then used in fertilizer and is basically responsible for the creation of modern agriculture. And it still uses a lot of energy, and we haven't really found a way around it. And it's one of one of the big things. But yeah. There's something called electrochemical nitrogen reduction, which is a way to synthesize ammonia from nitrogen and water under ambient conditions using electricity. So that was a big one. But is that the one I was looking for? Photocatalytic chemical looping. There's a lot of alternative Haber-Bosch processes that are in development. So I think that if that being scaled up could be one of the most massive ways to reduce our carbon output on Earth. All right, question: why are Canadian provinces so independent when in most countries they are administrative regions with little power? Mostly because Canada is a confederacy. It's not. It wasn't developed as a independent state. What I mean by that is, so Canada was made under the British North America Act, and before that, there was no such thing as there's of a thing called Canada. There were several different colonies like Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, Upper and Lower Canada, British Columbia, and Newfoundland. And Newfoundland didn't join until much later, but these were all British colonies. And so what happened is that Canada wasn't made to make a individual country. Canada was made basically for Britain to take all of its North American colonies, slap them all together, and say, okay, you guys are now quasi-independent. And so we had to we didn't we didn't have a sort of centralized identity to become a country. We were just sort of confederated together. And so our country was founded on the idea that we were a bunch of colonies that were just sort of banding together in a collective defense agreement against the United States. And with the common purpose of specifically building a rail line to the Pacific coast and colonizing what would become Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, which at that point had not had serious Western colonization efforts yet, and they were worried about that because the Americans who the Americans had already started their westward expansion, and we did not trust the United States to stick to their side of the 45th parallel. So they were like, we need to get there before the Americans do, basically. So because that was the origin of the Canadian state, it meant that like we were like the rules were kind of set up so that it was supposed to be like more of a shared market and collective defense pact rather than like like a revolution or anything like that. And it just sort of became a country once it stopped being a dominion. And so, it's because we're a confederacy, like I said. So yeah, like Canadian provinces can have like, to some degree, their own immigration policy. They can have like, to a very, very limited degree, their own foreign relations. And like, there's like a lot of like, pretty much like on an average day, Canadians interact in their day-to-day lives. Canadians interact way more often with their provincial government than with their federal government. Like our healthcare system is managed by the provinces. All of our like sort of infrastructure and everything like that is managed by the provinces. Like aside from just a few big programs, pretty much everything is run by the provinces. And a lot of Americans don't know that. Like, Canadian provinces are way more independent than American states are. And, like, a lot of efforts to unify the country have been met with backlash for various reasons. Like, one of the more, contentious political things in Canada is equalization payments, where a portion of the income of the richer provinces go to the poorer ones, and that often leads to like political tension issues. And even like when Mark Carney came into power, one of his like first things that he wanted to do was literally like was reducing interior trade barriers, which means that we had trade barriers and like issues between provinces. So interprovincial trade is still not entirely free. So there's been some work to break that down as well. What are your thoughts on Trump asking Texas to gerrymander districts and California doing the same thing to counter their gains? I mean, American democracy has always kind of been a fraud. It's just like I feel like maybe this is like a little bit spicy to say, but I think that a lot of Donald Trump's second presidency doesn't include a whole lot of new things happening. What it does include is a lot of doing explicitly what would normally had some like branding around it before. Trump is really just like America without its like branding of self-importance and self-delusion on top of it. And I think that stuff like that is an example. In 2026, I got a governor election, federal house election, state assembly, senate election, I think county. Yeah, so that's messed up. Here, what would happen is that like fairly regularly, like I have voted in 2 elections this year already. There was an Ontario election earlier this year, and then there was a federal election very soon afterwards. So like, instead of like having like one election day where you have to vote on all things, what'll happen is that in Canada an election will be called, and then like within 30-ish days or something like that, there will be an election. And that's when like the campaigning can start and everything like that. And then once all the voting is done, it's done. So like we don't like know when the next election's going to be. We know that like that they can't not call an election before a certain point, and that'll happen. Like, for example, we know that the last time the city government was elected was in 2022. So, and they have to have an election every 4 years. But they could call a snap election if they wanted to. But they wouldn't, because they'll keep in power as long as they legally can. But it'll happen. But like that's just how things work here. And if there was like a referendum or something like that, we would have the referendum. Like every single election is not all like kind of forced into the same thing. It is going to be like all of them are going to be their own elections. Well, like, yeah, when Americans go to vote, they have like 1,000 fucking things on their things. Canadian Supreme Court judges have way better official outputs than SCOTUS too. Yeah, the Canadian Constitution, honestly, like, mostly because it's not 250 plus years old, the Canadian Constitution is pretty robust, and we have had times, and we have said several times in recent years where there have been some pretty good dubs that happened because like a law that was on the books was deemed to violate the Constitution, even for things that like the government didn't want to be the case, and they were kind of forced to change the law to adapt to fit the like new interpretation of the Constitution. Like when like one example is that the Ontario Supreme Court found that solitary confinement violated the Constitution, and that just meant that the government had a year to get rid of solitary confinement. Like they just had to find within a year they had to end it. Another example too, which was interesting because it happened during Harper's year, and Harper was like, or still is, he's still alive, but Harper is an evangelical Christian, and he was prime minister, and while he was prime minister, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled that our ban on the sex trade was like having like prostitution be illegal was a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is the name of our Constitution. And so they had to change the law. They didn't legalize the sex trade necessarily, but they sort of I can't remember what the result of that was, but they had to do some serious alterations of it though, as an example. You don't like electing a highway superintendent because, bro, I don't care who does it. But also the thing is, like, things like being the highway superintendent, like, that isn't a political job. It shouldn't be a political appointee. The being elected doesn't say anything about whether or not you would be a good highway superintendent, because it's more like a job that you would like hire for, like, because your job isn't to be like a political position. Your job is to be the superintendent of the highways, and so like you should just be hired for being a good highway superintendent by the government. Yeah. Let's see. Parrots also eat insects and small vertebrates on occasion in the wild. Interesting. And elephants also have long institutional memory and complex social group selection. You know what, Elliot? That is... Yeah, I know that... Elephants are... Pachyderms in general are, like, really fascinating in that sense. I am kind of curious about... Because if you really do think about it, an elephant being as intelligent as it is, evolutionarily, at least in my mind, it seems like it's very expensive and wouldn't make sense. So I do wonder, what is the selection pressures causing elephants to be as intelligent as they are? And especially because it seems like their intelligence is very much based on, as you mentioned here, like knowledge, like passing down knowledge. And I wonder if it's because, I think, now I'm no elephant expert, but I think that elephants are like migratory, and that their migration routes are very, very long. And so it could be like kind of based on that, but I'm honestly not sure. That would be, if anyone has an answer to that, I'd be very curious. The Haber process, I thought, largely just used coal to raise temperatures. Yeah, could be. I'm not a chemist, but I do know that that there is like, because of specifically to fight climate change, there is like a bunch of like chemists and stuff that are like trying to find new ways of doing the Haber-Bosch process in order to make it less energy intensive or not use carbon. John, just got in, wanted to say what's up, and with all the bad news lately, any good stuff happening? Yeah, we just did you just missed a really long conversation about like about a bunch of stuff that I'm kind of excited about. Yes, the classic. Okay, so Canada technically has a constitution, but yeah, there is a weird part of the Canadian Constitution that was, I think, which is the notwithstanding clause, which used to be that. So this will make Americans really spin. So the notwithstanding clause is a thing in the Canadian Constitution, which basically says that if something happens that is deemed unconstitutional, but the premier of the province concludes that it is like something that is critical to that province's identity and like its like existence, that they can actually invoke the notwithstanding clause to basically ignore the Constitution. And it was a very rarely used thing. There was a really funny thing where, because our Constitution, the Constitution as it exists today, was developed and signed without Quebec. Without Quebec's input and without Quebec sort of signing off on it. All the other provinces basically signed off on it except for Quebec. And for a number of years, because of that, the Quebec government invoked the notwithstanding clause for every single law they passed. Even if it had like nothing to do with like violating the Constitution, they just wanted to say in every law they did so without recognizing the Constitution. Parrots descended from birds of prey. Oh, interesting. It would be great for these renewable things worked out. I'm all for doing them. I think they're just long shots. The thing is, like, I understand what you're saying. The thing is, like, the science behind them is sound. The major problem is geopolitical. The major problem is that the West is so dependent on oil as not only a source of energy, but as like its source of like international control over the world. And so other countries like China, for example, is using green energy and a lot of these like kind of technologies to fight climate change as a way to undermine American supremacy, because they know that like the powers of the future are going to be the ones who made energy by not depending on fossil fuels, and they want in. They want to be on the ground floor of that, while the West is sort of like, with its like dogmatic attachment to capitalism, is so short-sighted that they think that they can just like rely on just oil forever, and it's not going to work, and it's already not working. Does the Kardashev scale have some capitalist growth ideology treated as universals? Not necessarily. I think that it, even outside of capitalism, if you look even at like the like 10,000 year history of humanity, you will see like our technological development is very much tied to us being able to harness more and more energy. Like that is, if you think of energy as like not so much like specifically electricity, but like uh, and it makes sense. Like our society develops more the more that we are able to harness other forms of energy to do work that we don't want to do or can't do. And I mean, like that is like, you know, everything from like windmills, you know, to ox-drawn carts, to fire, to the steam engine, to the internal combustion engine, to like nuclear power, are all forms of us capturing more energy in order to use it to do more work on our behalf. And so I wouldn't say that that's necessarily, and it would not be it would be quite a it would be quite a break with the trend line if the future depended on us, like if the future resulted in us using less energy to harnessing less energy to do work. I think that's pretty reliable. Yeah. There's a separate publicly funded, explicitly Catholic school board. Yeah. Well, that's because it was designed to segregate the French and the Irish, obviously. Hey Tristan, how are you? From Michael Collins. I'm doing all right. It's Saturday night. It's a long weekend. Feeling all right. Elephants have long gestations with long calf with cow times too. They've maxed out on their few babies, put lots of effort into them strategy. Interesting. I'm now going to have to research elephant evolution, I guess. To figure out what put them, why are they like that. Greg Grandine's America was a very enlightening about what evil monsters they were too. I think it's also a byproduct of needing an incredibly complex brain to control the muscles in their trunk. Yeah, but like also, why did they need a prehensile trunk? Some kind of for traction power well before the rise of agriculture in Mesopotamia, which is cool. Yeah, that is cool. I like that. Apparently, goat pulling power in the Eastern Mediterranean is documented to be even older, which I also didn't. That is pretty sweet. Yeah, you know, that kind of makes sense because, like, a lot of areas in sub-Saharan Africa, specifically, like when you get to, like, sort of south of the Congo, there's a lot of, like, flat land there, and the people who live there have been, like, cattle herders and stuff like that for like very, 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 very long time. And they are some of like the most like, you know, long-term established, like, you know, there have been humans living in Africa longer than any other continent because that's where we evolved. So there's a logic there, I think. What are my feelings about degrowth? I think that I don't think that I know what you're getting at. You're kind of like, well, like, you know, if the Kardashev scale means that we're always using more and more energy, doesn't that throw us in the face of the idea of degrowth? I don't think that they are mutually exclusive things. I don't think that degrowth is as like, you know, ludistic as people think. Like, I don't think that degrowth is like, let's just become fucking Amish people but make it like woke or whatever. I think that degrowth is really is more of an economics thing, which is about not modeling our success metrics for economics on growth metrics, and instead focusing on like satisfying needs and stuff like that, because a lot of the problems with our economy that has done growth for growth's sake is like overproducing and creating demand when there isn't demand by like making like planned obsolescence and shit like that. I don't think though that would subtract from the overall fact that like our civilization will use more energy over time as we find new ways to use that energy to do things. Like that was like, as we find new ways to replace human labor with energy, we will keep doing it. And I don't think that degrowth necessarily like it, at least as far as I know, nobody but like the anarcho-primitivists are the ones who are legitimately arguing that we should like disregard civilization, become monkey, you know? Hey Tristan, always love the videos and streams, man. Glad to see you're still here. Any plans to upload soon? No stress. I know life is crazy these days. Just a hopeful fan for real. Thank you, Steven. Yeah, I have a video that's been in the works for a number of months. I have one more interview left on October 25th, I want to say, is when it's planned. And when that interview happens, I'm basically officially done the research for the video, and I'll be writing the script. I'm hoping that it'll come out in, like, realistically sometime in October. But I'm also trying to do a quicker video in between if the time comes up. But I also have, you know, another batch of podcast episodes that I need to research, and I also have you know, I have a bunch of other stuff. So I have, you know, a 3-year-old and an entire a whole ass full-time job. So, you know, those things also need to be taken care of. But I'm hoping that I'll be able to. I'm hoping that I can work it in. I'm hoping that I just miss making stuff. I miss making content a lot. I'll be honest. But, you know, kids grow up, and maybe I will have a job that cares less about arbitrary performance metrics and will care more about, you know, give me a little bit more time to breathe. But my next video is about Hindu nationalism. So, you know, the next video is going to have a lot about, like, Tulsi Gabbard and, like, what's it called? Like, Narendra Modi and, like, the sort of trying to explain to Westerners the entire idea that I'm going to try to explain Hindu nationalism to a Western audience, including things like issues that a lot of, like, Westerners probably don't have a lot of experience with, like casteism and like a lot of other kind of things like that. The other really wild thing when it comes to animal evolution is actually octopuses, because they are extremely intelligent animals, but their intelligence is so different from others. And on top of that, they're very smart, but they have extremely short lifespans. And yeah, there's probably some kind of like tragedy in that, I think, somewhere. Hmm. The 2-year lifespan is what gets me with octopus intelligence. Yeah, because like to give you guys an idea, like no, these are like kind of comparing apples and oranges because intelligence is so different. But like octopuses are thought to be like probably smarter than dogs, um, and yet they only live like 2 years. It's actually wild. And every time they reproduce, they die. There's a good sci-fi story about an octopus civilization called Children of Ruin. Okay, interesting. How do they deal with the fact that they don't live past 2? That's the big one. Being underwater is limiting too. Oh yeah. Are aquatic intelligent species not going to be a thing? For a reason that I don't know. Oh, interesting. Okay. According to the internet, elephants developed intelligence because they it was an adaptation to the climate moving from like forest to savanna, where they have to memorize, like they have to find patterns across huge distances of watering holes specifically. And so they are always like wandering around in search of water, and they have to remember this like sort of cycles, and that can happen over many years. So they've developed like a lot of their complex stuff to kind of keep those roots in mind and everything. And yeah, its brain also developed quite a lot for their trunks. It's interesting. But it is interesting because like their an elephant's food is extremely low. Like elephants eat plant matter, which means that like they have to eat a lot, because like that big brain of theirs is going to require a fuck ton of calories to stay going, and the amount of calories per pound of like just raw vegetation is pretty bad. So I'm curious about how they thread that needle. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left before I'm going to call the stream. So, what did we talk about today? We talked about electricity and elephants. A lot of talk about elephants. I'm the interesting part in that story is their head, brain, and tentacles are slightly independent. That is true, though. That is a fact about octopuses, is that their brain isn't. They don't have like humans. They don't have and it's kind of turning out to not entirely be true for humans, but they don't have a single brain. They have like a main brain, but then each of their tentacles actually does have kind of its own brain. It's a bit of a long shot. But there's some suspicion that the sort of it's like the vagus nerve or something like that has some intelligence, not like actual intelligence, but like it does a lot more for information processing than we thought. which may speak to why, this is like extremely kind of squishy science that a lot of people have run with in the wrong direction. But like, they're trying to explain why maybe like mood and digestion and diet are all kind of related to each other, and like the sort of interaction with the vagus nerve might be part of it. Take that with like an absolute fucking truckload of salt, because I'm not. It's one of those science things that is like very, very, very early in its development, and a lot of bad actors on the internet have used it to promote a bunch of bullshit. So. All right, we got about a minute and a bit left. What can we do? What can we finish off with? What would make people happy? You know what? I'll finish off with a video game thing, because I'm kind of hyper focused on Against the Storm, and I like it a lot. And I'm enjoying one aspect of it a lot, which is the idea that there's a lot of games that I enjoy parts of playing that I think, but I always like fizzle out in my interest in them because they always are like, this will last forever. There's no goal, there's no end thing. Like Minecraft. Minecraft is neat, but I've never ever like really stuck with Minecraft because like there isn't a point to Minecraft. Or like Dwarf Fortress, or like Dwarf Fortress I love a lot. I love playing it, but I always fizzle out because it's like, what's the motivation to keep going? While Against the Storm is a city builder, but it's also a roguelike, where like it has a whole lore about how the world keeps getting reset with apocalyptic rainstorms every couple of decades, and then during the times when the storms abate, you only have like about maybe like 20 or 30 years to go out and collect as many resources as you can before the next storm comes in. And you are like leading the teams that are like building these little outposts and trying to collect like certain resources and enough to like get everything you need before the next storm. And then in the longer goal, you're trying to go and fix these like magical seals so that when they're all done, the storms will stop. And that fucking rules. Alright. Some kind of crossover between the vagus nerve and bladder control, yeah. Anyways, this has been a really good stream. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm very sorry about missing the last month. I'll try. I'm gonna do another one of these in September sometime, and hopefully I'll have more updates on like the video and everything like that. Cause I want to keep making stuff for YouTube. I miss doing it so much, but just this chapter of my life is there's not a lot of wiggle room for like, I have a handful of things that my life has to be about, and I really don't have any space for anything else. But I'm trying really hard to keep it going. Anyways, the other thing that also slowed the video quite a bit is that I got a freelance contract in January that pretty much ate up a good chunk of my time until like June, but it's over now. Anyways, this has been a great stream. I miss you guys. I hope I really miss doing this kind of stuff. But take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I really hope that do something good for yourself. And yeah, there is always hope. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna finish off. There, despite all evidence to the contrary, there is always hope.